Hello and welcome. Hopefully this works. I'm using this board editor here on leadchess.org to show the rules of chess and how it works. So as you can see, there are 64 squares and 32 of the squares have pieces. There's 16 on this side, 8 pawns, 8 other pieces, and then there's 16 pieces on the other side as well. So there's different types of pieces. So these pawns here are all the same type. And the ones of the same type all have the same rules of movement. So let's start with these ones here. These are the bishops. And these bishops, they can move diagonally. So if I had this bishop here, it could move like this. But you can't move over your own pieces, so it would only be able to move here, or it could move all the way out here or here. It can move, if you move onto an opponent's piece, then you capture that piece. Notice how there's one bishop for each color. Like the light squared bishop can never go onto a dark square, and likewise the dark squared bishop can never go onto a light square. So the next piece I'm going to talk about is the pawns. The pawns, they can only move one square forward at a time, except for at the very beginning, they can move 2 squares forward. And this is the board editor, so I can move the pieces wherever I want. So I'm just showing you how that works in a real game. So the pawns can move 2 squares forward. There's another special rule with the pawns I won't talk about now. The knights are a bit weird, so I'll talk about them later. The rooks are easy to talk about. The rooks move in a straight line. They can go either way like that. So they're pretty powerful. Get 2 of those. So say for example we're playing a game. The rules of the game are you take turns, so you go one at a time, and each time you go you move a piece. So, and you can only move the pieces according to the rules. So I could go like this, the other guy could go like that. One thing I forgot to mention about pawns is that while they can only move forward 1 square at a time, except for their very first move when they're moving from their starting position, they can't capture a piece by moving forward. So this pawn right here can't capture this other pawn. The weird thing about pawns is that they only can capture by going diagonally forwards. And so this is an important rule because this is difficult to see oftentimes. So say for example, I play here and black plays here, and I could capture like this. But if I went like this and that, then I wouldn't be able to capture like this. So that's how that works. The pawns capture diagonally, but they move forwards, and they cannot move back. They cannot move to the side. They cannot move diagonally back. The king can move only to adjacent squares, but in any direction, hitting all of these squares. The queen can move diagonally and also horizontally. So the queen can go like this, or on a white square like out here. See how that works? See, I'm making a video of this so that I can draw arrows to show how the pieces move. Because the next piece I have to get into is the most complicated one. This is the knight, and this move I just did here, this is a legal move for the knight because the knight is the only piece that can jump over your own pieces, right? The knight, like these other pieces, I can't move unless I like move this pawn out of the way first. Then I would be able to move my bishop. I can move it here, and then I can cover these squares here. But the knight can jump over pieces, and the knight moves in an L shape. So the way I draw these arrows, you can't see the L shape, but you can think of it like it goes like this way, like that, right? So if I put this knight in the middle here, it could go, it can attack these different squares. So yeah, you can think of it as an L, but when you draw it all the way around, you can also think of it as a circle. You see how it's like sort of He attacks in like a radius of squares around the knight. So I'm like, this could be good practice just to, oops, try to keep an eye on where the knight can attack. Like the knight can attack all these squares. Those are the only squares it can attack. The knight is good at what's called a fork, which is where you attack two pieces at the same time. So if I had a knight here, it attacks this queen and also this knight at the same time, which is good. You can fork with other pieces here, like if I had this, like this is forking the king and the knight here. So how to win the game. Notice this is in no particular order, just talking about different rules. So to win the game, you basically have to capture the opposing king. And if you capture a piece, it's just removed from the board. But there's a special rule surrounding this, which is like pop, where it's called checkmate. So if I have this rook, for example, attacking this king, this is called check because the king is under attack, and if I don't do something to prevent this, then my king can be captured. So say, for example, I'm being checked by this rook. It's illegal for me to do any other move here, because on the next move I would lose my king, which means game over. So instead, what I have to do if I'm in check, being in check is when my king is under attack, I have to either block with a piece, or if, say, this pawn is in here, I could move my king out of the way. Or if, say, I could capture this rook, then I could do that with a knight, or any other piece that can attack that square, like a bishop if I had a bishop here. So if I'm checked here, like say it's black's move, and black moves here and says check because it's attacking the king. Boom, captures. So what else can I do? The starting position is the same every time. White plays first. The squares are all numbered, so there's the files and the rows. So no, not the rows, the ranks and files. So the ranks are the numbers. So this is the 8th rank, 7th rank, 5th rank. So when you move towards your opponent, you advance in rank, or you decrease in rank if you're playing as black. And then the files are the different like avenues across, so A, B, C, D, up to H, the H file, the A file. So this is called the H pawn, this is the G pawn, the F pawn, the E pawn, the D pawn, C pawn, B pawn, A pawn. And there's some special rules. Oh yeah, so check. So say, for example, what's a good example? If I say I'm playing a game like this pawn here, and I play this, and then white goes here, and I go here. This is actually checkmate because there's no move that white can make that can block this attack. There's no square the king can move to evade the attack. And there's no piece that can capture this queen. So no matter what move white plays, I can capture and it's game over. So that means that white doesn't even get to make this move. It's just over at this moment here. This is checkmate. Checkmate is when the game is over because the king is under attack and there's no way to block it, capture the attacking piece, or move the king out of the way. Okay, so with that out of the way, one more thing I can go into is castling. So castling is when neither your rook or your king have moved at all yet so far in the game, and if there's no pieces between them, then you can move the king 2 squares towards the rook, and then the rook goes on the opposite side of the king. And you can do this on both sides of the board. So say, for example, these pieces were out of the way. You could castle this way like that. So this is called the long castle or the queenside castle, and castling on this side is called the short castle or the kingside castle. And in case you are wondering, in this part of the screen here, that's what these symbols mean. This 0-0 means means kingside short castle, and this 0-0-0 means long castle. What else is there? Oh, there's also some funny stuff like your pawns can only move forward, right? So if you advance a pawn all the way to the end of the board, say there's like some captures, like moving just pieces, boom, gets to the end of the board, then you can promote that piece into any of these other 4 types of pieces. So normally you would promote it into a queen, so once it gets to the end, it transforms into a queen. You can transform into other pieces too, a rook, a knight, or a bishop, and sometimes it's necessary to transform into one of those other pieces to get a checkmate or to avoid a stalemate. So a stalemate is when it's easier to explain when there's no when there's very few pieces on the board. So say all of the pieces have been captured except for just these 3 remaining pieces. So the black king is boxed into this corner of the map. So I'll just play this out to a point where the black king is stuck. So since the white queen covers these squares, the black king is stuck between these 2 squares in the corner here, and so now there's no, you just alternate turns and it goes on forever. So say for example, what I would end up doing here is bringing this king down, and then I would play checkmate like this, because no matter which way the king goes, or even if he captures the queen, then it's just game over at checkmate. So that's why if you have a queen and a king against a king, you would keep the queen in a position like this where the king has moves, because if you say you put your queen here and the king has no moves, then that's called a stalemate, and it ends in a draw. And you want to avoid a stalemate because it's a draw, where you'll notice here the black king is not under attack from this queen. So this is called a stalemate, and if you get into a position like this where one player has no moves they can make that don't like no legal moves, it's illegal to move your king or allow your king to be captured on the next move. So if you're in a position where you have no legal moves and your king is not under attack, then it's a draw, and that's called stalemate. What else can I explain? En passant. So I'm just going to put all these pieces back. Do you remember how the pieces go? The pawns go on up front there, the kings go on the E file, or the queens go on the color of the square. So the black queen goes on the black square, the white queen goes on the white square, the rooks go on either side, the knights go next to the rooks. And it's easy for me to remember that the knights go next to the rooks, because if you're in a game and you move your bishop out, then there's no longer a piece that defends this pawn, and so that becomes a vulnerability, and I'm just familiar with that. So I'm just putting all these pieces back. There's probably a way to, reset this properly. I just don't know. Can't be bothered. So I'm going to explain en passant. So as I explained earlier, the pawns capture diagonally, so this move is legal. And so say for example, as black, it's my turn, and I want to play this move. This pawn can be captured, but if I move 2 squares forward, then you would think it can't be captured. And you're allowed to move 2 squares forward. You're allowed to move 2 squares forward only when the pawn is moving from its starting position. So say you move 2 squares forward, white in this position can still capture this pawn by doing en passant, which is where you move diagonally forward and it captures this piece. And so that's a strange rule, and you can only do that when you would otherwise be able to capture the pawn if it only moved 1 square forward. And I think that's pretty much it. I covered castling, knights, en passant, checkmate, stalemate, There's other ways to draw the game, like you can draw by repetition. Like if you just move back and forth, like do the same 3 moves in a row, then that's a draw. Both players can agree to a draw. That's another way to draw. If sometimes it's played with a clock, so if you run out of time, you lose the game. But if a player runs out of time while their opponent only has a king remaining, then it's a draw. What else? Hey, let me know if you have any questions in the comments. I'll be around, and I know this was a long 15-minute video. There's probably better videos out there, but I just wanted to just wing this without any sort of script or preparation at all. So I hope you enjoyed. Goodbye.